I do want to thank you all for joining us. So we're chatting with Z2 Entertainment CEO Cheryl Liguori. Did I say that right?
Yes.
Okay. Few things we're going to chat about, obviously, some recent events. But before we get into that, I'm Juan Torres with Prism.fm, and I do want to make sure that everyone, even if they have already, that you go and visit saveourstages.com. Real quick, easy way to support NEBA, support independent live music venues, and make sure that we're doing our part to try and get them some funding, so that we have independent music venues when things are back, so things can come back. The other place I'd like to point everyone to is if there are promoters or buyers who are looking for resources, some additional resources, there is indiepromoter.org, so IPA, which is meeting regularly. They've got conversations going, trying to help buyers and promoters. They're doing some interesting things with sort of data and helping people make some decisions that way as well. And so be sure to visit those two. And then before anything else, Cheryl, thanks for joining us. Appreciate you taking the time. Why don't you give us a quick intro on sort of Cheryl, Z2, and where y'all are at?
So Z2. So I started in Boulder at the Fox Theater, running the Fox Theater, moved over to the Boulder Theater, and it was always, in my mind to merge the venues. And so in 2010, that's when we officially formed Z2 Entertainment that oversees these venues. We have the Aggie Theater in Fort Collins. We book seasonally at a few other venues, Chautauqua Auditorium, Breckenridge Riverwalk, Steamboat, Strings Music. Z2 has been a really successful venture, starting with the merger of the Boulder and the Fox Theater. We're really happy that we did that.
I muted myself. How long ago was that merger between the two organizations?
Well, that was in 2010. 2009, I reached out to Don, who was my partner at the Fox, and we had conversations over the years, and so it's like, okay, the time is now, let's get this done. And so it was pretty quick and painless to it took the pain out of competing with each other in the same market. So that was so far in the past, I can barely remember it.
Do you remember what the first show you were a part of in general, sort of in the live music space when you got going, what that was?
Oh, that's a tough one. I kind of cut my teeth at Wetlands in New York. I was working in advertising, and a good friend of mine, Larry Block, asked if I would come help him in starting a live music club. I had no experience, never worked at a bar, never worked at a venue. So the opening of Wetlands pretty much coincided with the growth of the jam band scene. So I would say some of those first shows, Fish at Wetlands, which was it's a pretty small venue, like a 500 cap venue. The first Fish show there was how Wetlands became known as Sweat Glands. It was just ridiculous. The Blues Traveler, Panic, Spin Doctors, all of those shows. So that's where I cut my teeth. And it continued at the Fox. I moved from New York City to the Fox in 91, and then, joined with the Fox team in 92 when we opened.
Yeah, and then growing since. And have you all primarily stayed in Colorado, or have there been some shows outside of Colorado?
No, we've stayed in our on our home turf pretty much. I will say that the opening shows at the Fox are still legendary. We did 3 nights of the Funky Meters, so that also is, um, one of my favorite concert experiences.
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah, I know you guys have done some pretty interesting stuff, and I know anyone I mentioned Z2, they're pretty familiar with the Fox and some of the shows that have happened there. Sort of pivoting a little bit, this has obviously been a crazy year, and we chatted about this a little bit prior, but before this, when we scheduled this conversation, you had some shows going on. Things have obviously changed quite again, but how have things progressed for Z2 since early March? What was the summer looking like before COVID closures and lockdowns, and then maybe walk us through some of what's changed in Boulder.
Well, the shutdown on March 13th, the screeching halt, that was really brutal. And I think back then we all had hopes, no problem, we'll be back to business by the fall. And then by June, became pretty evident that, things were not going to work out that way. So we were pretty radio silent at all of our venues through the whole summer. We did some streams out of the venues without audiences. And then as things started to improve, um, the Boulder Theater, which has more square footage, we started talking about doing limited capacity shows. We had to open as with a restaurant component. So we brought in a food partner. And those 100 capacity shows have been pretty successful. Do they pay the bills? No, but our staff got to work. We were putting money in our local artist scene, helping our restaurant provider. And, one woman came up to me and she said, you guys deserve a mental health grant, because I feel that these shows are certainly helping my mental health and we need you to keep doing them. So it felt really good to be able to do that. But, everything as of last week, again, is at a screeching halt.
Yeah.
The Denver metro area is not in a good place. So we're down for all of our shows through the end of January. We'll evaluate in a month. We do have a full calendar for February, March, April. We are seeing signs of life in the touring world for the summer. So, but
That's
we
promising.
pivot minute by minute.
Yeah, I think everyone sort of has to. It's wild. I mean, I know that there are a lot of promoters and venues that are struggling quite a bit, given the shutdowns, and hopefully NEVA and the work that they're doing and fundraising and lobbying can get some aid to keep everybody afloat. But
they've done amazing work.
Yeah.
And the tenacity and the reach that they've been able to get, and they've been really, really effective.
Yeah, I agree. I think I still remember that first sort of independent venue week call, and where things, to think about where things have progressed from there. I'm optimistic that there will be something. It's just a matter of how soon we can get it. And one of the things I was curious, so I know we had been talking to David on your team for I think 2 years prior to Z2 coming on board with Prism, but y'all were pretty well organized prior to coming on board with Prism, and then we had sort of been talking about Z2 transitioning, and with a busy calendar, this all started to happen right before the shutdowns, and then we sort of onboarded the team. I honestly don't even remember the exact timeline. Do you remember from your end when that happened or what that was like?
I think March and April is
Yeah.
March, April. It was a pretty seamless and not painful at all transition. And we'd recently been through some, painful transitions in some of our systems. So, for us, your team did an amazing job. We all loved the way it was broken into segments initially, department by department, so that everybody understood um, the product and then our needs from a venue. So it wasn't one big, okay, everybody, here's what it is, let's go. It was really methodical and strategic, the way it was set up for, ultimate success. We had a great experience. Um, it was nice that we had a little more time, but I don't think that the shutdown was responsible for the smooth and successful transition. I think the way it was done was most responsible for the success.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I do have to give a shout out to Rosie on our team, who I know your team works a
Yes,
lot directly
she
with.
was great, is great.
Yeah, yeah. So we actually, Rosie came over from box.com. And so if you can imagine transitioning from Google Drive into Box, for a lot of people, transitioning from Excel or file folders or whatever they're using to Prism, she immediately noticed that there are a lot of similar conversations. And so she did a lot of work to revamp the way that folks have onboarded pretty much since she got here. And she's been with us, I think we've just chatted about it a year as of a couple of weeks ago. So it's been a lot of effort from her and the client success team in the making to make that happen. And what were y'all doing before? Was it Google Drive, and were you online sharing information that way?
We were we went from being two separate venues who were used to using paper folders, pre-merger, pre-Z2. But as we merged and the teams were in different locations, um, it really became clear that we needed an online sharing system. So we did, the first transition was through Google, using the Google Calendar, using Google Drive, having event folders. But we still were touching on so many other systems, and Dropbox for production, and accounting was not was having to create a show flash or a show P&L, really having to touch on 5 or 6 different documents in different places. And also, the manual entry from department to department really leaves room for errors. We do love that it's soup to nuts with the prison system, starting with the calendar and the holds, and just taking it through. We love it's all in one place,
Nice.
and it's just so efficient. Everybody's not entering the same information manually in their own individual systems, let's say.
Yeah. What was the catalyst for you? I remember, we chatted sort of by happenstance. We bumped into each other at the Eventbrite event in LA during Polestar, and then we pulled you away from a basketball game, and you had dinner with us. But what was sort of the catalyst that made you decide that this, March 2nd, when we got going, or that was the right time? Were y'all planning to grow? Was it just getting more organized? Like what ended up changing on your end?
Well, you know, organization, efficiency, productivity. Every year with the team, we look at, what are our strengths, or, a SWOT analysis, your strengths, your weaknesses, opportunities, threats. And it always came up how can it was a pain point for the team as a whole, that we had differing systems and manual entry, and we couldn't. So for years we had actually been investigating, what are our options. Too costly to build our own system. We're not AEG where they used Elvis, but were we looking for something where all of our information lives, our historic information, not going. We had a database that we kept with manual entry, which is, there's always room for error. And so,
Yeah.
that pain point, we get closer and closer, but we're always looking for a product, and we did look into a number of other products. But I think as Prism grew, as you guys grew your product, it became apparent that it would, at that point, work for us. And so it wasn't a hard decision for me. Once we all investigated and said, yes, this can eliminate a lot of our pain points, it was a no-brainer for me, because you have to, the same way you improve your PA, your lights, your sound, to make the experience better, you have to do that for your team as well.
Yeah.
Nobody likes to have their time wasted. We can get on to more creative and meaningful work, because of what the efficiency that we gain by using Prism now.
Yeah. And how big is, let's assume, roll back to the beginning of March, or when this is all over and back to 100%, roughly how big is the team interacting with Z2 and that might, touch Prism on your end?
Well, 6 to 7 people. We just have a department head in each. We have the 2 buyers. We have, me, of course, accounting, 1 person in marketing, 1 person in production, and 1 person who oversees all the operations. And they've been with us for quite some time, and so they know, they definitely have appreciation for where we are now. Where we used to have a larger staff with different, house managers coming and going.
Mm-hmm.
If you're doing, 400 shows, you need a team. The permissions feature is great, because we don't have to share top level information, but everybody can get what they need to run their show, to settle their show. Production advances. It's great, because when you go from, say, 150 people regularly working events, down to a team of 7, time management is key, and we're really thankful for where we are right now.
Yeah, I've sort of heard that there's some people that are doing things that they had team members doing before. And I know we feel fortunate to be able to help in any which way. I know, hearing that from you means a lot. So thanks for sharing that. I think, we do have a question about sort of some talent fees that I'll get to, whoever asked it, but I'm kind of curious, sort of coming out of this, building offers in Prism. Is there anything that you see just in general of offers that might change coming out of the pandemic, like when shows are kicking up touring?
Well, there were a lot of conversations around that, at the beginning of the year, when people were looking at the fall and how do, artist agents and venues share in a little bit of risk, because you just don't know that there's going to be the same consumer confidence. Your capacities may not be the same. So, I think that there are, we have to be everyone's got to be careful for the whole ecosystem to survive. So sure, will there be some minor changes, but the business is what the business is. And will it go back, when everybody's at 100% their capacity, I don't anticipate that there'll be any major shift in the way offers are having. I think it's this interim period where you're putting out offers, but you don't necessarily know what your capacity is going to be in 3-6 months.
Yeah.
So, I can say that with our limited capacity shows that we're doing, the way Colorado is looking is you get to a certain stage and then you can have this capacity, but then if things look good, the capacity goes up by 5% each month. That's really hard to put an
Yeah.
offer out on. You
Yeah.
just don't know. Will the uncertainty start to change? I believe it will, but we all have to work together to make sure that we are all, getting our basic needs met to come back in
Yeah.
a whole and healthy way.
Yeah. Well, everyone's an epidemiologist now. So, with all the news articles and
I know.
everything. So,
I'm not saying a word about that.
yeah. I mean, I have conversations every day, personally and professionally, where, we're throwing darts at what date things might be back to normal, depending on what it is that you're trying to guess is normal. So, I mean, on your end, how has the city of Boulder responded? Because I'm assuming that, you know, restaurants tried to open, maybe some were allowed and some weren't, and movie theaters and music venues. Have there been one-on-one
Well,
conversations?
the city's been really great to have, the city and the Boulder Chamber, they do a weekly call to kind of uh, distill what, Boulder County Public Health is saying. And the same with Larimer County, where we have the Aggie. They have been responsive, as responsive as they can in a safe and responsible way. We're in a university town, so that created some other challenges for the city. So, the city's been responsive, but right now, as of Friday, indoor dining is not happening. We are as close
Yeah.
to a lockdown as we can get without it officially being a lockdown. But I think all cities are trying to protect their independent businesses as best they can.
Yeah, and I think that's especially with independent businesses, you've got to protect the purse strings, do what you can, both to knock it on the bad side of regulators who can shut you down later, and to manage the bank account to stay open. So it's a tough position that y'all are in. When things start to open back up for Boulder again, I mean, how is is this previous experience going to change the way you open back up in the future whenever the green light is given, being that y'all were allowed to open for a bit and now shutting back down?
Well, for us, we, when I said, guys, let's try and do some local shows. Let's try and open up at our limited capacity. And, we'd do our numbers and say, do we think it's worth it? I'm like, it's not worth it unless we can get to this number, because, there's always risk. And we had put our liquor liability policy on hold. So we had to bring that back. And then, there are a lot of things that you have to consider, include, all liabilities and public perception as well.
Yeah.
So I think having had these shows for the month of October and the first 2 weeks of November has really shown us the appetite to gather safely, even distantly, to see some live shows and support our local artists. So for us, it'll be staged. We will reopen when we're allowed to do 100 capacity events, and we feel that the public will want to come back. So I don't anticipate we'll get back to full capacity for quite some time, but we've seen success and desire and need, honestly, for a lot of the community to come out. So we will, when we feel it's safe and the county tells us it's safe, to get back to that. We are doing the same thing in Fort Collins at the Aggie. Northern Colorado is not as in dire shape as the Denver metro area, but we'll see where that goes.
Yeah. It's ever changing. And sort of, given that you do span a little bit of Colorado, y'all had some pretty bad fires this year. I'm just realizing, last month we talked to Chris Cobb from the Exit In. They dealt with tornadoes on top of COVID, and you had to deal with fires on top of COVID. I need to figure out.
Okay, pile it on in 2020, and then let's be done in 2020,
Yeah.
2021. No, it was really really scary. I mean, I've lived here for almost 30 years, and I've never seen a fire season quite like that. And it just, we all have to come together to support. At one point I called Boulder County Emergency Services because it was freezing one night, and you could see all the firefighters who were in town, and they were there were a bunch of tents set up by one of our large open spaces. I'm like, we have bathrooms and showers and band rooms and socially distanced. We can fit 100 of the firefighters in the Boulder Theater, for a couple of nights or whatever, if you need to. So the community, they didn't take me up on that. But, we all have to, in every sector, our restaurants and our live music venues, and, we all just, it's going to take quite some time to recover from this, financially, and I think emotionally for everyone. So we just have to be mindful and do everything that we can to bring the joy back.
Yeah. And did y'all do a lot of live streaming at all? Is that something that sort of an approach that worked or you considered?
We didn't do a lot of live streaming. I know some areas can do a lot of live streaming, based on the size of their market and, who lives there. But we did have artists come in from out of town. The String Dusters came in for 3 nights, and they streamed from the Fox. We did a couple of the Save Our Stages, the fest streams from the Boulder Theater. We've done some, but not as much as others.
Yeah. What's been, and I guess you sort of touched on it, it's really having somebody nearby that can come in and stream from the venues, right? I mean,
right.
If someone's not willing to make the trip, you're sort of putting your name on a live stream, but the quality of that's probably a little bit harder for you to control and sort of put the branding behind it.
Well, and a lot of artists are supporting venues, that are special to them in some way or another too. Like Patty Griffin is supporting a bunch of 25 venues with her series of streams, and there's as I said, everybody's trying to help the whole community. Backstage is doing mental health sessions, Save Our State. Everybody's doing what they can. And I have to say, I feel like this industry is feels like a kindler, gentler industry. And I think we will all be better for it when we come
Yeah.
out of this.
Yeah, I agree with you. In some cases, I was in New York during 9/11, and I remember sort of the difference of New York City afterwards, something so catastrophic. And, this is a shared global event where we all will likely come out of this kinder to each other, a little bit more patient. You wonder how long it'll last, but regardless, there'll be a more tight-knit group of people. And I know, I mean, just from being on NEVA panels and subcommittees myself, I've seen that, people who would normally be competing are hand in hand making things happen. So,
It's a
are
closer knit
you,
community,
yeah,
sure.
yeah. Are there any folks in your immediate area where there's been some coming together? Because I know there are some NEVA sort of venue alliance in different areas, but is that something that's changed in your area?
Do we talk to some of the other venues and commiserate together and really talk more about what are you doing? What can we be doing? Is some of that going on? Absolutely. Do
Yeah.
we have a regional group? The governor's office reaches out and brings some event producers together to have a conversation. But are we more connected regionally and nationally? Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's good to look at the silver lining, at least whatever silver lining is there, to try and focus on because that'll still be there, hopefully, post pandemic.
I believe it will.
Yeah.
I believe it will.
John Metz had a question that he typed in, and he was asking if the pandemic changed the way you manage your calendar at all.
Um, the way we manage our calendar, you know, I don't know that all venues are the same. I take all the corporate and private events, the conferences, some of the community events off the plate of the talent buyers so that they can do what
Hmm.
they do best. So for me, the way I manage the calendar is I know that third and fourth quarter of 2021 is going to be crucial to maximize events and leaving room for the best opportunities that could be presented out there. So am I confirming certain events right away just to fill the calendar? No, I think we have to be a little more targeted so that we can maximize those quarters. But also you have to realize it's a little risky for artists to put themselves on the road and tour across the
Yeah.
country, and they need dates in order for it to work for them. So we are, first and foremost in the live music space, and we need to make sure that we are not that we have every opportunity for them to be able to tour successfully across the country at our venues. Does
Yeah,
that
it's got to
make
be
sense? Did I
yeah,
answer that question for him?
I think so. And sort of someone asked something else about private events, and I was going to ask something similar, but do you think a lot of promoters or venue owners that I talk to will say that, if they really want some cash in the door, a private event is a good way to do it. You rent the room, you get your fee, and I don't know sort of
It's
how folks
guaranteed
balance
revenue.
that. Yeah.
I did have a lot of people, not a lot, but typically in December we host some holiday parties, but it's also still a big touring season. I know a lot of venues are going in that direction. The events that we had on the calendar all went away. So
Yeah.
there's only, when we started doing our 100 capacity events, people started reaching out and say, well, maybe we can scale down this event. Are you available for, are you available for rent? But that's all off the table.
Yeah. And I at least in Austin, there were some carve outs for funerals or weddings. I don't know if that's even still the case anymore, but it is. Were you seeing some of that there, where that people could still have weddings of a certain capacity, or did that go away?
Most, I think, in the private event world, when people have weddings, I just honestly last night moved a wedding for the third time, um, which is another feature I love about Prism, because you just have to change the date. And when you consider, people managing calendars out there, I mean, how many times have we moved shows and events? Four times now, pretty much. That's great. But it, it just depends on what our capacity is. Um, and we will always try to accommodate for those. But, you know, sadly, anybody that I know that was having a wedding or needed a celebration of life service or a funeral, people are not traveling to go to
Yeah,
those,
yeah,
and
that's
so there's a lot
yeah.
of, virtual events there.
Yeah, and that is one of the tough things too. Is a lot of virtual events. You don't have people, families in the same cities anymore, as you can attest to. And I think I'm the only one in my family in Austin. Everyone else is in New York, and so it's tough headed into the holidays. You're not going to see a lot of travel, weddings. I'm assuming no companies are going to put people at risk for holiday parties either, because uh,
Right.
that's a liability just waiting to happen.
Well, and I will say with private events and business events and conferences, it is a great option to, if your touring calendar is light, it really is a great option. I have um, three multiple day conferences that I had to move. But I'm always, um, I'm always looking to see you know, what the live music need is first. But
Hmm.
but it is a great way to have guaranteed revenue that supplements your concert calendar.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think a lot of, music venue owners, while you have that room to rent for private events, you probably didn't get into it for private event rentals. I mean, you got into it for the shows, to help enable or create some art in the community. I mean, what sort of, if someone were just planning to get started coming out of this pandemic, I'm sure there were a lot of people that were thinking they were going to be, music venue owners someday or promoters someday, prior to March. What advice would you have for them if someone's listening or going to watch the recording, that they should think about doing now or as the pandemic starts to end?
So, advice. I think that the first thing you have to do is you have to love the live music experience, because we all know, those of us who work in this business for any period of time, it's a hard business. It takes a lot out of you. And you have to be in it because you love it, and you have to like people. It's a people business.
Yeah.
But you have to be in it for the right reason. And there's a lot of directions you can go. So I would always encourage anybody entering this business is to explore as many options. It's rare that it's a straight line maybe with the exception, in the talent buying world, it seems um, that if that is your passion, that's your passion. But there's so many other segments to get into um, to be a vital part of this industry. So, listen and learn, as much as you can. Talk to as many people in the industry. Don't burn bridges. Don't, you never know when the person that, I, when I started at, say, the Fox, I mean, we had folks who worked at the Fox as interns that are now some of your top agents. Um, and so, I still have people come back to me and say, remember the time you gave me this opportunity? And so, just be generous with your time, generous with your experience. People just want to know. I had one point, a guy walked into my office. He called and asked if I could please give him a few minutes, and I said sure. And he came and he sat down. He's like, I really want to be in this business. How do I get started? I want to work here. And I'm like, well, we have a production internship. Why don't you start there? You can learn a lot there. And he moved his way through departments, became, assistant general manager. And then when everything shut down, he decided to get his MBA. And so there's no experience, whether it's box office security, production, bar, talent buying, marketing. It's good to know every little piece of it, because then you can
Yeah.
understand how all the pieces fit together and what decisions affect different departments. The industry is not in a silo. So I would just say, dig out as much information and meet as many people, and above all, be in it for the right reason, because we all work very hard to make these great experiences.
Yeah. Yeah. I think some of the most genuine people that I've met, and I've bounced around in a few different sort of industries before landing full time in live music, but the people in this industry are some of the most genuine. There's true passion in the things that people do, and it's sort of the old anecdote: if you can find something that you'd be willing to do for free, in some cases as an intern you're going to be doing it for free, then you really don't work a day in your life. So that's something I always sort of go back
Good.
to. Yeah. There was a question about sort of Z2's comedy, and if it's a growing sector. I've seen a lot. I
Yeah.
mean, Chappelle is in Austin right now, actually tonight for his 3 day or his third day. Is that something that's going to be growing for y'all?
Yeah. I mean, we've been doing comedy for a while. We do work with sometimes AEG or Live Nations, kind of national comedy booking, and they rent the room. But we've been doing comedy with good success. I remember even before we were Z2, um, Bill Maher, I was watching Bill Maher, and he's like, yeah, I'm about to start on thinking about doing some college tours. And I ran into the buyer and I'm like, I just heard that Bill Maher might be willing to do some college markets. We can't afford them now, but we've done a fair amount of comedy. The Boulder Theater is the largest for seated events, but we do film festivals, we do corporate conferences, we do comedy, some spoken word. Um, I, we're almost like a, community, center than just a concert venue.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. And I mean, I think there's going back to the patron, the customer that came and told you that this has been great for them. Live music a lot of times is that, especially the independent venues where the people working them, who own them, are there in the community, like it is a community center. These are the people that shop where you shop. Sort of just another plug for folks to visit Save Our Stages and support the work Neva is doing. But nothing against the other venues out there, but something special about independent venues and communities and keeping those alive. And so,
Ditto.
sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
I've got my Save Our Stages mask.
Yeah.
Buy some merch.
Yeah.
Donate
That
where
that
you
goes a
can.
long way. Yeah. I was going to ask you, sort of thinking outside of Boulder, do you think that Z2 will be outside of Colorado someday, and sort of like what does the future for Z2 look like in a normal world?
We did look at a few venues outside of Colorado. Um, we were originally looking in Montana. We were looking in Lawrence, Kansas. It really just depends. For us, it has to really be a good fit
Hmm.
for the business. And one of the things that we decided to do was we decided to buy the Aggie, and we'd been talking about that for years. We brought in an operational partner for a year and then bought them out right when the pandemic hit. So, the Colorado region, we don't want to go into markets that are already saturated. So these days, you know, those are harder and harder to find
Yeah.
as the stretch of your AEG and your Live Nations are, you know, broadened.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think while there are some sort of, you know, promoters and venues that are shutting down, you do see some of those large players, and obviously rumors of, grouped venues and conglomerates popping up, and what that scene might look like. There's also been, at least
We're
in my opinion, go ahead.
Oh no, continue. Sorry.
Yeah, I was gonna say there's been quite a bit of change in the ticketing world, and I know that y'all ticket with Eventbrite, but how has that sort of that change in Eventbrite been for y'all, and sort of, we have an integration with them, so I'm kind of curious about how your team uses that, and where ticketing.
So we love the integration because, as I said, we like to get away. We like the automation of it, just pulling in the ticketing data. The more we can get away from kind of manually pulling together information, the better for us. We've always been fairly, you know, we're not as dependent on our ticketing partners. We don't have anyone build shows for us. We do everything internally. Long ago, we were with Frontgate out of Austin for a long time.
Yeah.
And then went to, Ticketfly, and then, Eventbrite. So for us, ticketing has changed so much. Your ticketing company is also your marketing partner, and that really didn't used to be such a integral part of the ticketing system. So, we are currently with Eventbrite. We're happy with where we are right now, and but we continue to assess the needs of the business and the future of our business, and what role ticketing plays there.
Yeah, I think obviously our integration with them is something that a lot of our clients sort of grasp, to just being able to have those ticket counts pull in automatically, and settling the shows. We starved for a day when more and more settlements are happening, because that just means that more shows are happening. But I know hopefully one day we'll also be integrated with all of the ticketing companies that are out there for all promoters who don't have the luxury of integration today. You mentioned ticketing has changed. There's been, quite a bit of news, at least with Ticketmaster, in coming out of COVID, and that they're going to be doing, rapid testing, or no, there'll be paperless ticketing going forward. I mentioned some comedy shows in Austin tonight, and they're actually doing that for the shows. Do you think that that's sort of the future of shows in 2021 that'll happen with all ticketing providers?
Yeah, I'd say it's certainly looking that like that's the direction it's going to go. And then, your ticketing partner is also going to be your contact tracer as well. We're not going to be rid of COVID automatically, but I know that contact tracing is a huge piece for what your local public health authorities are looking for you to have that capacity, and the way to have that is just to have that data with your ticketing company. But I think the contactless, for your bar service and your ticketing and your entry and all of that is where we are right now, and where we'll
Yeah.
be permanently.
Yeah, I think as few things that are touched and handed off, that's where things are headed. I'd be curious to see how, sort of, for the consumer, that ends up being received. I love a good, scan my phone or scan something, but I also do love my binder of tickets that I save, the ticket stubs for, and remember the first concert I took my wife to, or the first one I took the kids to, and wristbands for festivals and all those sort of things. I assume there has to be some commemorative back end of that maybe it's a merch add-on. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that that's true, because like you know my friends and sort of business partner as well, and Don with AG, who is the founder of the Fox Theater. I mean, he has the #1 ticket. We used to actually get artwork, send it to a printer, and the printer would send us hard tickets. So boy, have times changed. But yeah, people do mourn the loss of that. I was just looking when I was at home working this morning. I have 3 beautiful leftover salmon 25th anniversary color sparkly tickets. And I look at those and I smile, and I think that, yeah, we will have to step up our commemorative ticket game as everything becomes contactless. And we need to support our industry artists as well.
Yeah, yeah. Somehow it's we're coming up on time, but I did sort of want to sort of remind folks, if they do have a question, they can feel free to chime in before we wrap up on time. On my end, I just want to say thanks, Cheryl, for taking the time. To everyone listening, please remember to go to Save Our Stages. It's in the chat for the live webinar as well. And then the only other question I have, Cheryl, is if you have, if there is someone who is thinking of, switching to Prism, or, just making that switch to their business operations, is there anything that you would say to sort of, if they're hesitating or
I would
thinking
just
they'd like to
say,
wait?
do it. It is, I can tell you that I'm always, you know, we're always talking about ways to improve. And, the team originally was, change to a new system. And over this period, even though we haven't been as active as we normally are, I reached out and I'm like, you know, give me your feedback. And I do this every, close to every month, so that if there are features that we want to hit you up with that we need,
Yeah.
I'm staying on top of it with them. And it was glowing reports from every single department. And I'm talking accounting, box office operations, production, booking. Um, it just really, it was what we were looking for, and I'm so happy we did it. So I would say just don't wait, because especially when you come out of COVID and you're running at full volume with the number of events, um, the efficiency is, you know, it's there. And we have slimmed down teams where we will be able to handle the same workload um, in an accurate fashion that's not going to screw us up, because we've made this jump into Prism. So I know I
Awesome.
sound like a
Yeah.
cheerleader, but it really has
Well,
been that
appreciate it.
significant to our
Yeah.
team, because we were looking for years and agonizing over, do we build something ourselves? And we didn't have to.
Yeah. Well, I think one thing that some might not know is we do everything in house. So our small team is mighty in some of the things we develop. That's been one of our commitments throughout the company since March 13th. We physically stood in a circle and said we'd do whatever we can, both from the engineering standpoint and from the client facing standpoint, to support independent promoters and venues any way we can. So some of the upgrades you've seen are a result of that. And if there ever is feedback, let us know, because I think you've already seen some list items get checked off. But I do want to wish you well, Cheryl. Hopefully, you and the family are safe through the holidays, whatever family is able to be in the same place. And I'm sure we'll chat again before the end of the year.
Same to you and the whole Prism crew. And thanks to everybody for listening in. And I hope everybody found it informative, and get on the phone with Juan today.
Thanks,
All
Cheryl.
right. All right.
Thank you
Thanks
so
so much.
much. Thanks everyone for attending.